A young boy witnesses a spaceship land behind his house, leading to a hostile alien takeover in Invaders from Mars, a remake of the 1953 original.
But I don't know how many people would remember this movie, the remake, since apparently it was not a hit in any way,
Right.
shape, or
It was
form.
not a hit.
But oddly enough, both of us saw it in the theater when it came out.
Well, I mean, it
And
was
when,
geared for us. It's a
yeah,
kids adventure sci-fi horror movie that's PG, I would guess. Um,
yeah, and the premise I think is definitely would appeal to children. Like we said, when we saw it, we were like 8 or 9 years old, and that would probably be a decent age for this movie. But the whole thing of,
it's probably a little young, honestly. Right? I think
well, I don't think
if I had
saying
a
that,
kid, I don't think I'd show them this until they were like 12, maybe.
I don't know. It seems tame,
Yeah.
especially now. But
I remember being scared at a bunch of scenes in this movie when I saw it in the theater.
well, that's
Um,
good. I mean,
yeah, I mean
well,
that's
they
what
used
you're
to
supposed
make
to do, right?
children's movies used to be scary, right? Even like the Disney movies, the animated Disney movies used to be scary. And
I
now
think
I
they
don't.
still are.
Well,
The
now they make Pixar things that aren't.
Yeah, no, but did you see Toy Story
Oh,
4?
sorry. Hold on. My
The
dogs are going crazy.
dogs are barking. Did you ever see Toy Story 4?
Yes.
There's that scene where they're all gonna go into the fire and get burned
Oh,
and
that's
die, and
three.
there's no that was
Uh,
three, and they're gonna die, and they're like crying and hugging and accepting their fate, and they're gonna be burned up, and they're
I don't
holding
think
hands, and then they get
was that scary though to kids. As an adult, I
I
didn't
bet.
think it's scary, right?
No, as an adult, I was
It's
like,
meant to be
wow, this is
touching,
really
right?
heavy,
Yeah,
you know. But I bet a kid, a 12-year-old, would think, oh my god, they're gonna kill Woody and the other guy.
I don't know. They used to make children's movies, and people of a certain age could name any number of Disney movies that they felt had scarred them in some way, right?
Right?
Even, but if you saw it now, like, oh, Bambi's mother gets shot and killed
Yeah,
off
yeah.
screen, you'd think that's so tame or whatever, but it had some kind of psychological effect on people at that
Well, and
time.
there was a forest fire, and yeah, it's yeah. I remember being not really liking Bambi
Mm.
because of the opening.
But
Like I
children's
was,
movies should be
yeah,
scary, right? Because they're supposed to teach kids lessons like don't
yeah.
talk to strangers and, question
I mean,
authority.
like the Lion King. I'm sure the opening the Lion King was devastating to a
Right,
lot of little kids,
right.
right? When the main character's dad gets killed by his own brother,
Mm.
and you're not, you don't know anything about uh, Hamlet, so
But
you're
this
not
movie would
thinking,
appeal to kids of a certain age because it's like, they think adults are funny or the way that grown-ups act is strange. And they,
and
if they have a
what would you
teacher they
do?
don't like, they're, that kind of thing.
Right, and like, what would you do if you saw an alien spacecraft, and then you tell your parents, and they don't believe you, but they go check on it, and they come back, and suddenly they're totally different,
Hmm.
and they're robotic, and your parents are now aliens. That's terrifying. Like that's a great. It's a great setup. You know,
Mm.
little David Wilson. We start. It's at nighttime, and is he sleeping already, or is he like looking through his
No, he's gone to bed.
he's gone to bed, and there's a big storm, and he gets woken up by a giant alien spacecraft landing behind a hill behind his house, and he goes and tells his parents, and they're like, oh, you just had a nightmare. And he's like, no, 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 it's not a nightmare. And they're like, yeah, and he like, oh, okay, maybe, and he goes back to sleep. But the next morning, he's like, Dad, you still got to go check on that thing. And the dad does. And then the
Yeah.
dad comes back and like somehow maybe infects the mom or I can't remember if they both go together, but
No, I
that
think the
it's,
dad starts he takes the mom, and then
oh,
he
right.
starts taking people, and
And
it's
then like the police
yeah.
show up too because the dad's gone missing for a bit,
Mhm.
and then they get and the sequences. So like basically, the alien spacecraft is landed, and there's this weird like sand dune behind the house, and it's strange. But there's this like sandy area, and this alien spacecraft has like gone through the sand, and when you walk on that sand, you can get like a whirlpool of sand like sucks you down into the sand into the spacecraft, and that's when you get mind melded
Mhm.
and taken over by the alien consciousness, um, which ends up being this like giant brain monster kind of at the end of the movie. Is it a
Mhm.
brain kind
Yeah,
of?
it looks like a brain. It looks like what he reminded me was from he reminds me of Krang, Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja
Teenage Mutant
Turtles,
Turtles.
which
Yeah,
was just like this talking brain, right?
right.
Um I just looked it up. I thought it's interesting that the original Invaders from Mars came out 3 years before the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh,
I would have thought it was the other way around.
right,
Um,
because very similar.
right, because this movie, the remake from '86, it's basically an Invasion of the Body Snatchers for kids,
Yes,
or geared towards kids.
right. Yeah.
Um, and I think that this movie is interesting in a way that following Life Force, which was a flop,
Mm.
it's almost like Tobe Hooper did a 180 where he's like, okay, now I'm going to make a kids movie. If
A
people didn't
kid's
like that
sci-fi horror
adult
movie.
movie, I'm going to make
Yes,
one for kids. And it's kind of like the safe choice coming off of Life Force, right?
it's honestly smart, right? Like
And
he went way too adult in Life Force with all the nudity and all the weirdness, and so he's like, okay, I'm gonna make a scary, fun adventure movie for kids, starring a 12-year-old boy,
mhm.
David. Yeah.
this, I think, like Life Force, this movie has good visual effects for the
Mm-hmm.
time and good makeup effects by Stan Winston.
Yep.
And this movie, I think, actually does one better in that, aside from the kid, who I think is like an unknown around that time, it has a
I don't
good
know.
cast. Uh, some of these people, like Karen Black, who plays the nurse, she maybe, is kind of not so popular anymore, but was a legitimate actress. And then
Yes. Yeah.
uh, Timothy Bottoms plays the dad. Again, he was more
George.
popular earlier in his career, but Laraine Newman from SNL plays the mom.
Mm-hmm. Ellen.
Louise Fletcher, who won an Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, plays the main. Is she the main human villain, I guess?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
She's his mean teacher, Mrs. McKelch,
yeah. But
and
then it even
yeah.
has Bud Cort. I don't know if you
Oh yeah,
recognized
it
him.
does. Yep.
Has who has a very particular look, right? In this
Yep.
movie, he plays a scientist, Bud Cort from Harold and Maude fame.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh god.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And then the actor that plays Colonel or General Wilson.
yeah. He's
Uh,
probably been in a million movies.
yes, a million movies.
Um, so good cast. Oh, and the also good production design, because the set for the mothership and even in the tunnels leading into the mothership, I thought were
Mm-hmm.
impressive. So,
It's that's a big set. Like the mothership, the inside, they built that set on a soundstage,
mm,
and it's it's two stories. Um,
Yeah. So it has the budget. I kind of felt like rewatching it all these years later, and I hadn't seen it since then.
Hmm.
I thought the first act was kind of boring because I know, and probably anyone now who watches this movie would know the direction that it's taking.
Right.
So to me, it was kind of like, all right, let's move it along here a bit and get it going. And then,
Right.
once it moved into the second
So
act, it was better.
once David and uh, the
Linda,
nurse Linda, once they start going on the run basically, and going on their adventure to find out, what's going on, where is the alien spacecraft, and then they go inside it, and then they involve the army, and yeah, the production values are great, and the acting is much better than Life Force, except maybe for David. Like, he's not great. um he's not bad though. He's not bad.
right?
he's
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 not
he's
bad.
plucky. He's not bad. He's not great. But everyone else is pretty good. And yeah, the visual effects are cool. Stan Winston and John Dicastra worked on it. Um, okay, the scene. There's one scare in the movie that terrified 9-year-old me, and is still probably the best scare in the movie. It's David's at school, and his parents. He's convinced there's something very wrong with them, um, and no one really believes him. And so he's in class with Mrs. McKelch, and they have to um, dissect a frog. And then we kind of cut, and class is over, and he has to go back into the classroom to find Mrs. McKelch, maybe because he thinks she's acting strangely too. And he goes quietly back into the room, and then there's like a room behind. There's a second room, and he goes in there, and he can see her from behind, and she's doing something, and he's walking up trying to find out what's happening, and she spins around, and she's eating one of the frogs, and these frog legs are sticking out of her mouth, and like she shoves them in, and he just like gets this terrified look on his face, and he runs off. And then she's chasing him because she knows that he knows that there's something wrong with her. And he goes to the nurse Linda, and that's when he starts she starts to believe him because Mrs. McKelch is acting so strangely. But that
Yeah.
scare terrified me as a kid. And I
Back
wonder how they did it. I wonder, like, is it alive? I don't remember because it's been a month since I saw it.
No,
Are the
I think
legs
it's just a
moving, or is
rubber
it
frog,
it's
but
just
the
a
way
rubber
that they
frog in her
cut it,
mouth?
they cut it. Well, she does like kind of swallow it at that point, so maybe it's, gelatin or something.
Yeah.
But that was watching it now as an adult, I think that was one of the more memorable scenes because it was
Mm-hmm.
suspenseful, and then the
Yes.
the reveal as an adult was funny, right? Because as a kid, you can imagine if you saw your teacher eating a frog. Uh,
That would be terrifying. You'd be like,
well,
what is
yeah,
going
as a
on?
kid, you'd be terrified, but as an
Uh-huh.
adult, it's funny. Like
Yeah,
that
it's
explains things
ridiculous.
about my weird teacher. But
Yeah.
uh, I didn't. My memories of this movie, thing that I remember most was the kid using the coin to activate the laser and the laser beam and the
Uh-huh.
alien creature. But I don't remember being scared at all by this movie.
Really?
It's funny,
You
yeah.
don't
And this movie
huh.
came out in '86, right? I remember seeing Predator in '87,
Yes.
and that was scary.
Oh my
So
God. So scary. So scary.
I
I was
think
sure Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to die. I'd seen like Commando. I think Commando came out first, right? I don't even know, but I had seen a couple Schwarzenegger movies and I loved him. And I was like, there's no way he's not gonna make it. No, this thing is too big and too strong.
Like, so it kind of tells me, like, well, in '87, I would have been too young to really should not have seen a movie like Predator, right? But somehow by that time, I was already
Loved movies and wanted to go.
desensitized to a certain point, and that I didn't think Invaders from Mars was
Was
scary.
scary. Huh. Oh man, I thought it was yeah. Well, no. Well, yeah, I thought that was scary. Um I thought that scene was scary, but the stuff with his parents should have been scarier.
Hmm.
I think just scarier, not bloody, not no space girl nudity
Hmm.
from Life Force, just scarier.
Oh, before I forget, I thought, is it strange that David has no friends? He doesn't even have a best friend?
It is strange
Because
because he's
now,
at
of
school.
course,
Yeah.
with Stranger Things and everything, you would like have his group of friends. And even in a movie that we love, Monster Squad from the '80s, it's a group of
Mm.
friends.
It should have been.
S- So I think
It
he
should have
should at
been.
least have had, a best friend like a Millhouse character who
Okay.
gets uh
Body
taken
snatched.
over. Yeah.
Right.
But for him to have, no friends is just kind of weird.
It is. It's a weird choice. And if you're gonna make a if you're gonna make a movie, basically Body Snatchers, where all the adults are getting body snatched, yeah, it would have been way better if David had three best friends, two guys and a girl, and two boys and a girl, and because they're all sixth grade, and yeah, then it's like no one's going to believe them, and all their parents have been turned, their teachers have been turned, they're on the run. They go all of them find the alien spacecraft. They go inside. They see some scary stuff, and they're like, "We got to do something." And that's when somehow that's the craziest scene in this movie to me. David and Linda, Nurse Linda, they're on the run, and they know there's aliens. And Linda's like, "Who's the adult?" She's like, "What are we gonna do? No one's gonna believe us." And David says, "General Wilson." And it cuts and they're in a general's office convincing him that he needs to do something and the army needs to do something. And he's like, maybe I'll make some calls because I know your father because he works for NASA and kind of works for me. And then within like 10 minutes, he's like, yep, there's aliens. We're gonna send the army to the backyard with that sand trap where the alien spacecraft is. And
Yeah.
it's just crazy that a 12-year-old kid can be like, General Wilson, cut, and you're in this general's office, and within 10 minutes, he's like, yep, send in the Marines. Which is
Yeah,
also an awesome sequence. For a
right.
kid, 9-year-old me, that was awesome when suddenly there's, trucks full of Marine Corps guys and or Army guys and in all their gear and guns, and
Yeah,
it's cool.
that's funny because now as an adult, I thought that was kind of dumb.
Well,
Not
it's
not
dumb.
in
Yeah.
what was well what was dumb was not, well, they call in the Marines or
Mm-hmm.
anything. Like, I understand that. Was dumb is just how you cut to their house and these like two tanks pull up, and now you just got all the Marine guys just running in there going, hut, hut, hut. Like, they just
Yes.
run
Looking for his
with no
father. Yeah.
formations or any kind of
No.
direction. It's
Yeah.
just like, it was at a time, I guess, where they didn't really strive for realism. It's just like,
Yeah.
right,
It's
send
just
in
yeah.
the extras dressed in uniform. But
Yeah.
I also thought that it was extra funny because one of the Marine guys is played by Dale Dye, who became
Oh,
famous for being
Yep.
a military, what would you, a military expert advisor.
Yes.
So I guess most
Like
famous
Saving
for
Private
Saving
Ryan and
Private Ryan, right?
mhm.
Advising them on the set how this should be done and whatnot. Uh, but he, so maybe, well, this was a long time before Saving Private Ryan, and he was
Oh,
probably
yeah.
not really well known at that point. But
And he'd been in the Marines, right?
yeah, I think his experience was in Vietnam.
Right.
Uh, which I think that explains some things too, because they got watching videos now on YouTube about Saving Private Ryan, they got some things wrong.
Oh,
not to,
like
not to,
anachronisms and stuff, using the wrong
well, like
gear
just
stuff.
yeah, historical inaccuracies and whatnot. But
I
not
mean,
not
it's
that
a
that's
movie.
his fault necessarily, you know. But
No,
I
it's probably
wonder.
props, right? Technically, it'd be the prop master's fault.
Well,
Like
I
they
wonder
got
if
the
we went
wrong
back in
sight on the
time.
gun or something.
If we went back in time to 1986, I wonder, Dale dies sitting there on set and he's thinking to himself like, well, they're doing this
This is
all
all wrong.
wrong. I don't
But
know.
again, it's a movie for kids.
Right.
So when I saw it 9 years old in the theater, um, I was just, oh, the army guys, and oh, there's tanks and APCs, and they turn on these big lights because it's nighttime to light up the weird sand, this giant sand pit
Behind the
behind his
house.
house. It's so weird because
But
it's all
that
like
shot,
green and beautiful,
yeah.
and then there's this weird sand dune.
The shot of the hills behind his house, and there's kind of a fence railing, wooden railing, and then the mothership comes, lands
Yeah,
right behind it and whatnot. That is so,
miniatures, right?
yeah, but it's so reminiscent of ET. It's, I don't
Yes,
know
yes,
if
it
it's
is.
you know, a an homage to ET because Tobe Hooper had worked with Spielberg at that point.
Yep.
Um,
Well, I
or,
mean, it's almost exact. That sequence is almost exact in the original, in the
mm,
black and white version. Is it
okay.
black and white? I think it's black and white. But yeah, it's like shot for shot.
Mm,
But yeah, I think a bunch of the exteriors of the house are fake. But then there's that one scene where the Marines show up and they run inside, and I'm like, oh god, that is that a real house? I remember thinking, I think they had
mm.
shots of it that were the miniature, and then kind of the real. Um, but
How
yeah,
how old is David in this movie? You think is he
he's
12 or
12.
something?
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, if you remade this movie now, I think there'd be even more opportunities there that they didn't explore. Like maybe if you made him 13, let's just say, and you made the nurse like this attractive younger woman and he has a crush on her, that
Okay.
would maybe help explain their closeness
Right.
in the movie. And then also there's no bully, which is kind of strange for an 80s movie. But
Yes.
if David had some bully at school who gets taken over, then later in the movie he could like run him over with a car.
Or punch him out or something. You know, to
Right?
run him over the car.
No, he runs him over the car. He goes into the windshield, rolls over the top, and then
Uh huh. That's it.
and then a passing truck runs over his
Oh
legs.
my god! Now you're making the rated
well,
R version.
well, hey, you wanna see the boy get his
I think you could
just
just keep.
desserts?
He's like, you're scared, you're not gonna fight back, and David's like, like, yes I will, and just
Yeah.
punches him in the face and knocks him out. I think that's enough.
There was a
What really the main villain, instead of being Mrs. McCalchin, and Louise Fletcher is great in it,
yeah.
and she's she's a great. It's weird how threatening she is. Cause, cause she's kind of just a, a, a little woman.
Right. Well, why not make the why not what if the bad teacher was like the PE teacher and he was played by Lou Ferrigno or something? And so when he's
oh,
chasing after you, pushing people out of the way,
right.
you feel like he's gonna break you in half.
Yeah. See, I would have done it where the main human villains are David's parents because that's
Mm,
scarier and
right.
it's more traumatizing.
Yeah.
Like if they're going after him and chasing him and the nurse or him and his friends, I think that's just stronger. And you can still have Mrs. McKelch eating the frog. But like, what if that scene was David's own mom? That's scarier, right? And
Mm,
more distressing to a
yeah.
kid. And if suddenly you can't trust your parents and you can't trust your teachers,
Yeah.
then yeah, you have to rely on
Yeah.
friends. It
Instead of
should have been a group of
yeah,
kids.
instead of the mom eating burnt bacon, if she was eating the pet cat or something.
The
that's
cat.
that's too much.
That's too much, man. Don't kill
That
the.
would
You
have
can't kill the
don't
dog.
that
It should be in a dog because it's
that
an
would have
'80s
been
movie.
terrifying.
Oh
No,
no, but
you
that's
can't.
too much. That's too far.
Well, the teacher eats a frog. The cat's too much.
Yes, yes, yes. It's too much. He should have a
Uh,
dog. He should have like the family dog, and maybe the mom like is going to like stab it, and it escapes, and so it tags
hmm,
along for the rest of the movie.
right.
Well, David and the nurse are, like you can't kill the family dog in a PG. That's too much.
No, obviously, someone needs to hire us to rewrite this movie. Obviously, it just
Yes.
reminded me of The Faculty. Do you remember that movie?
Oh yeah,
Now, that was not a good movie.
that was not a good movie. That was a
But
bad
yeah,
movie.
but that was basically this movie, right?
It was, yeah, it was.
Like an
Oh, except that
unofficial
that's
remake.
kind of like the good version of this movie where all the parents and all the teachers are getting body snatched and the high school kids have to rely on each other.
Do the
That's the
parents get
idea.
taken though?
I
Is it
I only remember like the
hmm,
teachers. It's
right?
like
Well,
all the
it's called The
teachers in the school.
Faculty, so I
Right, it's called the faculty, so they're all getting
I
taken.
assumed it was just the teachers, but
Yeah. I
they have
think Jon Stewart from The Daily Show is one of the teachers.
teachers. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Maybe even
Robert
Selma
Patrick.
Hayek or something.
Yeah, I
Or
think
there was some
so.
beautiful woman that gets caught and it was whatever, early 90s.
Oh, it might have been Famke Janssen.
Oh, okay, maybe. That would
Yeah,
make sense. Who was the director of that?
that was Rodriguez.
That was Rodriguez, and that
So
was, yeah, it would just not, no, it's just not
typically,
good.
it was devoid of wit, you know.
Yeah, and it was just if yeah, I remember not liking that movie. But maybe I was a little too old. Maybe if I was 13,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Um.
like Invaders from Mars. I loved it as a kid. Um I I guess like Life Force, yeah, I would call this an October movie. Like if you really like
mm,
Halloween, like I love Halloween, and you like to watch horror movies, good and bad, you throw Invaders from Mars 1986 into, well, you'd stream it or on
You
Tubi.
know, I have one question for you,
Okay.
and this I think this was you mentioned the frog scene, but I think this is the darkest moment of the movie for me, which
Okay.
is the ending, because it seems
Oh,
like all has been resolved, but then he wakes up and it's like, no, that was a fever dream or something. And he sees the spaceship land and he runs to his parents' room. He opens the door and it's like he realizes they're aliens and he screams. The movie ends. And I think
yes.
that's really a dark ending, right? Based upon everything we've seen before.
Yep. And then yeah,
So I don't
I don't
know.
know
It's
why they
almost
did
like a
that. That was
joke.
dumb. Yeah,
It's like Tobe Hooper's joke, like an adult joke inserted into a kid's movie.
it felt like a weird note from the studio or something. Like, we need a stinger ending.
Mm,
Like, oh, like, we maybe we can do a sequel if this is a big hit. So cut to somewhere else, and oh, some of the aliens are still alive or something. Kind of like the last scene of Big Trouble Little China, where everything's resolved, and Jack,
hmm
what's his name? What's Kurt Russell's character's
Jack
name in that movie?
Burton.
Jack Burton is
Burton.
driving off in his truck, and then we see like one of the monsters on the back of it. Like, they wanted a stinger ending, something like that,
Yeah.
and Tobe Hooper just came up with the worst one. It, like, yeah, it negates the whole movie, and
But did the original end that way?
I don't
Probably not.
remember.
Probably not. I think that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm,
I don't remember. The original, it's not based on a book. This is original screenplay.
mm.
Um, but yeah, so we watch these B movies, um, which doesn't necessarily, there's some great B movies, right? Would you say this was a good bad movie, a good B movie, or a bad movie?
I don't think it's either. I don't think it's a good movie or it's a bad movie, because it's competently made and everything, and
Hmm.
it has those merits that we've discussed. So I feel like this movie is, lost in the middle where it's not good or it's not bad, but
It's kind of boring, right?
it's kind of slow at the beginning, but
Yeah.
overall it's not memorable. It's not, people aren't going to revisit this movie like
Well, we
E.T.
did.
and Big Trouble in
But
Little
I think
China
you're
and
right.
whatnot.
I think I agree. It's
Yeah.
it's
Even Life Force, I'd say, has a cult class or a
is
cult
more
following now
memorable. Yes.
because of how bizarre and insane it is. And this movie just is kind of like you know, ends up being a bland remake, kind of.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Between this and Life Force, for like, if you want to watch a horror movie, 3 horror movies a week in October, um, I would probably. And I didn't like Life Force, but it had more going on, and I think the first 40 minutes
Mhm.
of Life Force is definitely stronger than any 40 minutes in Invaders from Mars. But Mrs. McKelch and that frog in her mouth, still, that terrified me as a kid. So I don't know, like, the problem, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's just, it wasn't good enough or memorable enough to say it's a good movie, but it wasn't. It's a competent movie, the way it's shot and made. So yeah, I guess I would call it a C.